Okay, we're going to continue with Zed Hashem. Section 5, chapter 10. Chatzar Yosef. We're talking about the stories of Titus. Titus the Rasha, Titus the wicked one, Roman general, Roman Caesar who destroyed the second temple. God sent a mosquito up his nose. Again, I'm telling you in short because I don't want to keep saying the story over and over. Please see the previous lectures. That would be of chapter 10, section 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I didn't do 2 actually. I did section 1, 3, 4. Now we're doing 5 of this long story. This is the last section of this story. I'm sorry, no, I'm not. This is the penultimate section, which means there's one more after this about Titus. Let's see. The mosquito was living in Titus's brain. It went up his nose, living in Titus's brain, and it was making him suffer, it says over here, for 7 years. The Gemara says, this is the Gemara from Masechet Gittin, by the way. The Gemara says, I'm translating in English, page 142 in the book. It was taught in a Braita. There's a Braita about this, amazing, about this. Rabbi Pinchas ben Arova says, I was amongst the noblemen of Rome. I was present, he says. And when Titus finally died from the suffering of this mosquito, chewing at his brain, they split open his brain, I guess they did an autopsy of some sort, and found that the gnat, the mosquito, had grown to the size of a sparrow. Sparrow is a small bird, a medium-sized bird.
Slightly elastic.
So what kind of sparrow? He says the sparrow size weighing 2 sela. Sela was a measurement of weight or of volume. We'll talk about it. A 2 sela sparrow was the size of this mosquito. That's how big it grew. It was taught in another Braita that it was like a 1-year-old young dove weighing 2 litra.
That's exactly what it is.
So imagine this type of medium-sized bird. This is one says sparrow, one says dove, different measurements. Okay. Abaye said we have a tradition passed down that its mouth was made of copper and its claws were made of iron. How do you understand this Gemara? Is it fairy tale? No. Is it miracle? No. What does this mean? Again, the Chachamim took ink to paper to write this down.
It is explaining to
Why?
It is explaining to you
Yes.
the kind of pain to expect from this gnat. The beak was soft.
What was soft?
The beak.
The beak was soft.
We're talking about
made out of copper.
Yeah. But it grew to the size of a bird in his brain
his brain,
over 7 years.
and that's what killed him?
Yes.
The king of Rome.
Yes, Caesar. Titus.
Before that, he was the child.
Okay, let's see our questions. So just to clean up some things over here, Sela, we said it was one of the measurements. Look at note 1. Sela is a biblical unit of measure of mass equivalent to about 18 grams. So he says it was 2 Sela, the first opinion. Second opinion says it was 2 litra. Litra, note 2, is about 450 grams. So it's much bigger.
Huge difference.
Yeah. Okay. Sha'ar Chatzar question, section. What are the questions we have in this Gemara? Number 1. Was the gnat's reaching of the brain and growing so drastically something miraculous or something that could naturally happen?
It's not natural.
Could it happen? If a fly or a bug flies up someone's nose, can it really reach the brain?
You're asking me.
The brain, yeah.
How?
No, it could reach the brain, but to grow that big? I don't think so.
Well, if it's there for 7 years eating the brain.
To grow that big? No. First of all, it shouldn't last that long.
Yeah.
The lifespan.
You're right. Right. Most flies and mosquitoes don't live that
A
long.
couple of days.
Couple of days mosquitoes? There's so many of them. Okay. Question number 2. What is the significance of the different weights and sizes of the gnat that our Gemara provides? 2 sela, 2 litra, sparrow, young dove. The our Gemara says, what do these things mean? What should we do with them? How do we understand them? What is it teaching us? Third, what is meant by Abaye's statement at the end that the gnat had a mouth of copper and claws of iron? Is it meant to be taken literally? Is there a deeper significance? What does it mean? So now let's at least do the Amudei Chatzar section today, which is the commentaries explaining what we have. First one, Maharsha. Maharsha says, page 143. According to the opinion that says that the gnat was the size of a young dove, the hint refers to the pigeon that was part of the Brit Ben Abitarim. In English, that's covenant between the parts. That took place between Hashem and Abraham, where several animals were cut into two, and Abraham was told to walk in between them, next to a pillar of fire that walked with him that represented God. You know about this? It's in the parsha, Parashat Lech Lecha, I believe, over there towards the end. Brit Ben is one of the covenants that God made with him, and over there, as we explained, the young dove. There was a few different animals that God said, cut them in half, and walk between them, and my fire is going to walk with you. The young dove, however, and the turtle dove were which again, they're two. I don't know the difference between a young dove and a turtle dove. It's a slight, it's a difference in size between these two species of doves, but the Torah talks about them all the time. Torah and Ben Yonah. It's also an age difference between them. These were the only two animals that were not cut in half. They were part of the ceremony, part of the ritual, but they were not cut in half. The young dove represents Israel, the nation of Israel. And the hint in our Gemara, according to this opinion, is that no matter what, the nation of Israel will prevail. All the other animals represented other nations. They will be cut in half, so to speak. But the nation of Israel will prevail. This is hinted in the same Tehillim 74 quoted by the Gemara way earlier in section 1, in verse 19. As it says over there in Tehillim 74:19, do not deliver the soul of your turtle dove to the wild beast. That's a poetic way of saying David praying to God. Do not deliver the nation of Israel to the wild beast, which means the other nations. Do not, let them win over us. Good. Maharal. What does he have to say about our Gemara? He says, regarding the size of the net found in his head, Titus' head, this is not meant to be taken literally. Maharal, this is his famous weapon that he uses to explain these fantastical Gemaras, that most of these things are not meant to be taken literally, and it's just metaphoric to teach you something deeper. That's the Maharal's approach in a lot of these Gemaras. Rather, the Gemara described the size of the net in two versions, right? It said one version was sparrow 2 sela, the other version was young dove 2 litra. In order to portray the purpose of such a punishment. In both versions, the weight of the gnat had a value of 2 in either unit, sela or litra, right? They both agreed that it was 2 something. That the size of it was 2 of something. Just like in Titus' lifetime, his goal was to slice, slaughter, and separate. And the simplest definition, because Titus was a Roman army general, he loved war and blood. You understand? And what do you do? What is a person who loves war and blood? He has a sword and he cuts things in two. Correct? And the simplest definition of slicing is taking something that was whole and splitting it into 2. This is your favorite topic, Manny, 1 and 2. That's, by the way, chapter 21. Which, see how that worked out, by the way. Chapter 21.
I think we did this one.
2-1. We'll get there one day, B'ezrat Hashem. So too, the value of weight of that with which he was punished, which means that mosquito, had a value of 2, as a midah keneged midah. Just like you like to cut everything in 2 because you're a lover of blood and guts, and iron and swords, so too, I know you don't like when I do this, that's how I wake you up. So too, the gnat weighed 2 something, 2 litra or sela. Separating 1 into 2 is not a good attribute in general, says the Maharal. That is why in the creation account, right, in the story in the Torah that explains the creation, very beginning of Torah, in Parashat Bereshit, Monday is not referred to as good. All the other days, the Torah says, God thought it was good. On Tuesday, it says twice, God thought it was good. One to make up for Monday.
Is that why everybody hates Mondays?
Could be. So why does it not say Monday was good, while the rest of the day said it was good? Why? Because it indicates that separation and division is not liked by God. Because Monday was the first incident of separation. Up until Monday, it was just one day. Time was a vacuum of just one thing. Then the sun went down, or the day ended, and the sun wasn't created yet. The day ended, and the new day started. Separation was made. A cleaver, what's the word I'm looking for? A cleft. No. A crack, so to speak. Separation between 1, now it's 2, now there's a Sunday and a Monday. We can't call that good.
Isn't it separation of seas?
Well, yeah, but even before the seas were separated on Monday, that's another thing that was separated from all the water into two things. The time itself, days, the concept of there being 2 days only started on the first Monday of creation. Right? So that was that's a non-physical thing being split into 2, and even that God didn't like, so to speak.
But wasn't God the one who...
He did it, but he didn't call it good. That's the point. He did it to show you this is not good. Separation is not good always.
But God did it. How can God do something that's not good if He's
Showing you that separation is not good.
Yeah, how would you ever know it's not good if he doesn't show you?
You understand?
Your
You're
parent...
saying God did something that wasn't good?
No, I'm sorry. He did it, but he didn't call it good, which means it's not recommend. It's not
necessarily bad.
no.
For you, so
But it's destructive. That's the point. It's not constructive. It's destructive.
Maybe there is a gray area because it's definitely not good, but it's also not bad at the same time because God can't make anything that's bad.
No, everything God does is good. Everything God does is good. Okay, but and even when He shows you the bad things, that's also a good thing. That's the point. Got what I just said? Everything God does and creates is good, and when He shows you what's bad, that's also good. Because you have to know what's bad so you could stay good. A lot of bad and good there, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay. Good. Let's go to note 4. We're going to explain this. Note 4. To explain, the first day of creation, Sunday, was not called the first day. Did you realize that? It doesn't say there was night and there was day on the first day. Yom Rishon. It doesn't say that. It says Yom Echad on day 1. Right? Rather, it's called day 1. A day of oneness, a day when there is only one. One means no separation. Everything is the infinite oneness of God. Okay? Since there was no other days yet, in a sense, all was unified, making it unnecessary to call it first, or making it inappropriate to call it the first day, because first implies there's something else, but that something else didn't come yet, so you can't call it a first if nothing else exists yet.
When you have a kid, you call this kid your firstborn, even though you don't have other kids yet.
You're right, but
kid 1.
You want to challenge it like that?
But I see what you're saying.
This is my first child.
It's very clear.
Well, let me put it to you this way. You're only saying it's my first child if you're planning to have more kids.
Correct.
What if a person had one kid and doesn't have one? Titus 2, that's it. Then this is my only child, my only son. Right? So up until that point, so what do we have to say? God didn't want to create more days yet?
Potentially, yeah.
That's requires thought. It's a good point. We'll think about that. Okay, so in a sense, all was unified, making it unnecessary to call it first, since first implies there's no other part. First implies that there are others present that follow afterwards. Once the second day, Monday, was completed, this concept of multiple days began to exist, disunifying the days, creating a separation. As is indicated further by the separation of the firmaments that day, right? On Monday, God separated the firmaments and the waters from each other. What was created on Monday itself was separation and division. Monday itself was a day of strife and separation. That's also why it says that Gehinnom, hell, quote unquote, was created on Monday as well.
At work, they make your first day of work after you get hired, they make you start on Tuesday, not on Monday.
Really? In general? Like this became a thing in your job? It's kind of like how they build buildings and they skip the 13th floor. It goes 12 and 14, which doesn't make sense because it's still the 13th floor. It's complete psychology that doesn't work. You're still on the 13th floor. You're just calling it something else. Anyway. Right, the Monday and Tuesday is skipping. Yeah, fine. That works better. That's more political. Okay. Going further over here, I want to just finish the commentaries at least. Maharal says, next paragraph, the comparison of the sparrow and the 1-year-old dove are allusions to the idea of completeness. Since a young dove is considered fully ripe at 1-year-old. This, coupled with the fact that the weights given by the two opinions in our Gemara both had its values of 2, right? Our Gemara is hinting at Titus's attribute of taking complete things like a dove, because at 1 year it's considered complete and ripe and ready to eat and ready to do everything. Titus' attribute of taking complete things and destructively dividing them into two, as we explained. All this is hints. All this is midah midah. It's all showing what Titus did and what he deserved to, what he did to deserve these punishments of the mosquito. So because of his destructive nature, he was punished with the destructive power of the gnat. Even if it was not a physical gnat, he was affected by the abstract power of the gnat. What does that mean? Look at note 5. It seems the Maharal is bothered with the approach of taking a Gemara literally, and instead prefers to say that the gnat killed him indeed, but that the size and weights described by Gemara that became so big and heavy are only to hint at the abstract concepts as to why Titus deserved to be killed this way. Meaning the Maharal is not comfortable with saying that that it was actually that big. He's just saying that those sizes are just hints for his sins. He took complete things and split them in half and destroyed them. So too, a sparrow that was complete or a dove that was complete weighed a weight of 2 litra, for example, or 2 sela, to show you that relationship of 1 and 2. Last paragraph in the Maharal. When our Gemara says that its mouth was made of copper, this is not meant to be taken literally again. Right? The Maharal says this is all metaphor. Rather, it means that its strength was very hard, just like the nature of copper, which is very hard. Similarly, when our Gemara says it had claws of iron, it means that it had very sharp cutting and scratching ability like iron. This was measure for Titus' attribute of destruction. Destruction is meted out in 2 ways, via striking and cutting. That's how you destroy something. You gotta hit it, you gotta rip it and cut it, right? Those are the 2 general ways you break something. Thus, the gnat had a copper-like mouth to strike with, and iron-like claws to cut with. The copper mouth and iron claws cannot be taken literally, since there is no such actual creature in the world. No mosquito has iron and copper as part of its exoskeleton. So that's the Maharal's approach. I want to do the Ben Yehoyada just to see a different approach, and then in the Chatzar Yosef next week, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to show you some deep things that we found with God's help. Ben Yehoyada says, our Gemara means to say that when they removed the gnat from his head, it swelled up in size. At first it was the size, so he's saying, the Ben Yehoyada is trying to settle all the opinions. He's not saying that they're the 2 opinions, one says sparrow, one says dove. He's not saying there were 2 different opinions. He's saying it was just, they're both true in different stages. Our Gemara means to say that when they removed the gnat from his head, it swelled up in size, which means at first the size of it was a sparrow, tzipor dror, which means a sparrow. That's the language our Gemara uses. This hinted at Titus' negative behavior, since the letters that spell this, tzipor, which means a bird, can be rearranged to spell parutz, same letters. Parutz means breach, to cross the line of a law. In the sense that his behavior in disparaging and denigrating towards heaven, right, he said terrible things towards Hashem, it crossed the line, it breached what can be said. Its weight of this mosquito at that point was 2 sela, according to this opinion. Sela is less than litra, remember, so it was big, but not as big as litra. A sela has within it 24 ma'in. Ma'in is another measurement, right? A certain unit of weight. So one sela has 24 ma'in. The hint is that Titus was attached to the 24 male nourishers of impurity and the 24 female nourishers of impurity. That's a Kabbalistic concept. Look at note 8. We'll explain what that means shortly. Ben Yehoyada is referring to a concept in deeper wisdom. This secret stems from the verse in Isaiah. I think I spelled Isaiah wrong. Yeah. Isaiah, Yeshaya, 54:12. The pasuk says over there, "V'samti kadkod shimshotayich." That's insane. This pasuk was in this past Shabbat's Haftarah, the Maftir. It was this pasuk. Hashem makes it fall out. What does this mean? And I will make your window frames rubby. Means like rugged, rough. This is a verse, a prophecy of the times of Mashiach. This was the translation I found in another book. So this is This is how it was. It might be like a homonym.
We had this discussion.
Perhaps. We have to look that up. But what does this mean? The word kadkod here in this verse, ruby or ruby, I think ruby maybe is probably translation. Not ruby the red stone, but ruby like a negative connotation of rough, I believe. Is this word kadkod is made up of a doubling of a two-letter pair of chaf dalid. The way you spell it is chaf dalid, kadkod. Split it in two, that's 24 and 24. Chaf is 20, dalid is 4. So 24, 24. Hence 24 and 24, that hints to the male, 24 male and 24 female qualities of impurity that Titus nourished from, that suckled from, got energy from, so to speak. When our Gemara continues and says it was the size of a 1-year-old dove, 1-year-old young dove, it means to say that after the gnat swelled to the size of a sparrow, it continued to swell until it reached the size of a young dove. Which means, again, he's saying it's in stages. They're both true, both opinions. Just one happened first, then the second one happened. Look at note number 9. In other words, according to Ben Yehoiada, the two opinions in our Gemara regarding the gnat's weight are not disagreeing with each other, rather they're simply describing the gnat's growth at different stages. So its weight at that point was as heavy as 2 litra, much bigger. This hints at the following. Titus was a descendant of Chief Magdiel, which is mentioned in the Torah, Aluf Magdiel, who was one of the 11 chiefs that emerged from the offspring of Esav. Right? Esav is the great-great-grandfather of Rome. And look at note number 10. Bereshit 36, 40 to 43. That's where the 11 chiefs are named. Right? The Torah names all of Esav's descendants. See Rashi to verse 43 over there, where he mentions that Chief Magdiel is Rome. He says that he's Rome. Rome came from him, or he is the Roman, original Roman person who started Rome. I don't know what it says. Chief Magdiel, Aluf Magdiel. Or from him came out Rome. So Titus was a descendant of that for sure. He's a Roman. Titus was attached also to the 11 Arurim, curses, which correspond to these 11 chiefs. Meaning in note number 11, in Devarim 27, 15 to 26, over there, the Torah lists 11 curses that a person should never get. In truth, the word arur, which means a curse, it appears 12 times in that passage, not 11. I counted it. Nevertheless, the commentaries refer to it as 11 curses. Perhaps because the last one is an all-inclusive curse that is not counted amongst the 11 specific curses before that. So there's 11 specific curses there. And there's 11 chiefs that came out of Esav. Each one corresponds to one of the curses. The word arur, aleph resh, vav resh, which means curse, in the holy language, translates to the word lit in Aramaic, lamed yutet. Layat means a curse. Taking the root of the word arur, which is aleph resh, ar, and putting it together with lamed yutet, lit, which is curse in Aramaic, produces the word litra, which is the name of the unit of measure that Gemara uses to describe the big size of this mosquito when it grew to the size of a young dove. Thus, the weight was 2 litra to hint to the fact that Titus was attached to both male and female sides of the klipa, again, of the impure forces. It seems that when a Gemara says that its mouth was of copper, it only means that once it swelled up in size, up to the size of a young dove, its mouth resembled copper. Not that it was actually made of copper. So even the Ben Yehoiada is not comfortable to say that it had a copper mouth, actually.
Why can't the Gemara just say it resembled copper? Why does it say?
Because sometimes it wants to say it in a straight way to sink the point further. We do that also in life. Like, we don't always say it was like this, or it was as if this, or we don't always use metaphor. The strongest metaphor is saying it directly, and but people who hear it know it's a metaphor. Mm-hmm. Like, I was trying to do this one thing. I tried 1,000,000 times. I couldn't get it done. Everyone knows I've been trying 1,000,000 times. I tried a lot of times, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, not 1,000,000. But it drives the point further. To me, it seemed like forever. You get it? Same thing here. Hyperbole. The hint is in the word for copper, nechoshet. Nechoshet. Nun Chet, Shin, Taf, which can be broken up thus. The first three letters spell Nahash, which means snake. Nun, Chet, Shin. Hinting at how Titus was attached to the Klipa of the original snake. He was of that class, of that team. Right? Esav, the Chatzar Yosef, angel of death, they're all on the same team with the original snake. The last letter, Taf, has the gematria of 400. Last letter of Nechoshet, Taf, has gematria of 400, which equals Ra'ayin. The gematria of that phrase, Ra'ayin, which means evil eye, equals also 400. But also bears the connotation of stingy. Ra'ayin means stingy. It means someone who doesn't want to give you a lot, we call that Ra'ayin. A bad eye. Someone who gives a lot is called Ayin Yafa, he gives a lot. Good eye, nice eye. That's the contrast. So this evil eye, Ra'ayin, is an energy that Esav attached himself to as well. He's giving you all the depths of how he attached himself to all these dark forces to be able to be thrusted to the top level against the Jews. Similarly, the nails of the gnat only resembled iron. Again, he's saying the nails looked like, or were similar to iron, they weren't actually iron. This hinted at the following. The letters of the word barzel, which means iron, bet, resh, zayin, lamed, barzel, can be broken up the following way. Bet lamed and zayin resh, bal zar. Then bet and lamed can be substituted for the word el, which means God, aleph lamed. How can you substitute that? Look at note number 13. The reason why bet lamed can be flipped out for aleph lamed, right, is because bet lamed has a gematria of 32, aleph lamed is 31. And then you can, there's something called kolel. Kolel means the complete, the inclusive. You add that to the gematria. So if you have a phrase of, let's say, 3 words, the gematria of all the letters is 300, for example, you can add 1 per word. So that's 111, that's 3, you can make it 303. Or if it's just 1 word, you add 1. So same thing here, Aleph Lamed is 31, plus the Kolel is 1 for the whole word, that makes it 32, which equals Bet Lamed, Bal. So you can flip them out, you can do that with anything. He's substituting, it's like algebra. He's substituting the Aleph Lamed for Bet Lamed, because the gematria of Aleph Lamed could be 32 with the Kolel. It's 31 plus the word is 32. 32 is Bet Lamed. It's like math, right? So you could take the Bet Lamed of Barzel and make them into Aleph Lamed, which means God, thus producing the phrase, and then you take that Aleph Lamed and put it back into the word Barzel, you can get El Zar, which means a strange God, which is another energy that Titus also attached himself to. El Zar is also a concept in the deeper wisdom of the source of idolatry, of the Azara. It's another impurity. It's that.
50 gods.
Exactly. Last point here of the Ben Yehuda, we'll call it a day. Furthermore, it seems that the 2 resemblances of copper and iron in the gnat have another significance. In that, Titus disparaged and denigrated. He did 2 things, the Gemara said before, and all the way in section 1. He did 2 things against God. Disparaged and denigrated. Chiref vegidef. Those are 2 different languages the Gemara used of how he said terrible things against God. Towards heaven, corresponding to the Sefirot of Tiferet and Malchut. Tiferet is the middle, Malchut is the final product. As measure for measure, the gnat that tortured him had these 2 resemblances of copper and iron. Since copper is sourced, meaning it corresponds to Tiferet, and iron corresponds to Malchut. These are deep concepts.
Every metal corresponds to different.
Yes, the major metals: gold, silver, copper, iron. Gold is chokhmah, silver is binah. Then copper is malchut, and copper is tiferet, and iron is malchut. And also that's the level of their value, the preciousness. The level of the preciousness, so to speak. Gold is the most valuable, that's why it's chokhmah, all the way on top. Silver is 1 level down, that's binah, to the left of it, right? Then you go down to tiferet, which tiferet really represents all the 6 around there, all the 5 around it. Tiferet is the ultimate representative of all of them. Of the chesed, din, netzach, and hod, tiferet is the major player there, right? And so the 1 level down after that in the metals is copper in value. And then iron is the cheapest. So iron is malchut, the final level down. Lowest level. Without getting too much into that. So bottom line, we see Maharal says everything's a metaphor. Ben Yehoiada says half of it is a metaphor, half of it is not. He seems to be saying that the bird was actually that size. The mosquito actually grew to the size of the first the dove, then the sparrow. He's not saying that's a metaphor. He only said the iron and the copper on it was a metaphor. So we'll see, B'ezrat Hashem, in the Chatzar Yosef, the approach that we take and what we reveal next week. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen.